Hey oddballs, we found a better spot. Here's the man, the myth, the legend, shooting at the Lower Spokane Falls on a really cool camera at night.
Well, you've probably already sorted out that this is not a Hasselblad camera. So, what the heck is it? What camera am I shooting with that uses Carl Zeiss lenses and a form factor similar to a Hasselblad? Well, it is a Hartblei, which some of you may have already heard of. Hartblei was a company that was started in Kiev, Ukraine in the mid-1990s. And they specialized in remanufacturing Kiev cameras. So in this case, my Hartblei 1006M was a remanufactured version of a Kiev 88. Now the 6 in the 1006M moniker has some meaning. The 6 means that this uses a Pentacon 6 lens mount. And what that means is with the Pentacon 6 lens mount, I'm able to mount lenses that were manufactured for the Pentacon 6, including all of the fantastic Carl Zeiss Jena lenses. Now, the list of upgrades that Hartblei performs to the base Kiev 88 is pretty extensive. They strip the entire camera down, rebuild the entire thing from scratch. As part of that process, they check all of the gearing within the camera, and they even upgrade some of the gearing with their own gears that are of a stronger material. They replace the factory installed lubrication with more modern lubricants. They obviously put on the Pentacon 6 lens mount. They install a vastly upgraded version of the shutter braking mechanism, which is of their own design, and they claim increases the lifespan of the shutter to 25,000 actuations. They also rework the back mounting plate and the gearing inside the camera so that it is compatible with Hasselblad backs. They also install the film advance crank, which is not present on a stock Kiev 88, a strengthened base plate, and in the case of the master model like mine, they include a mirror pre-release. They also install black velvet material inside the camera to eliminate reflections. And last but probably most importantly, they actually perform a complete series of adjustments on the camera to ensure that it is actually adjusted properly and working properly. So the Hartblei is one of the very few cameras I've ever purchased brand new. And I think I bought this somewhere around 2006 or 2007. And at that time, the cost of the Hartblei, if I remember correctly, was the complete kit was around $750. And that for that price, of course, you got the body of the camera, a 80mm lens, 2 backs, this waist level viewfinder, and then also a spot metering prism viewfinder. Now, at that time, for the same price as what I paid for this kit, you could buy a really nice used Hasselblad 500C kit with lens and back. So I did think quite a long time about whether I wanted to buy a Hasselblad kit or this Hartblei kit, since basically they were the same cost. And ultimately the decision obviously went with the Hartblei, and I can summarize the reason for that in a single word, and that word is lenses. So even though the entry price point was about the same, with the Hartblei, with the Pentacon 6 lens mount, I could also buy a 50mm Zeiss Flectagon lens, a 120mm Zeiss Biomatar lens, a 180mm Zeiss sonar lens, and this is the famous Olympic sonar lens, very nice lens, a high-quality Killfit 300mm macro lens, and a 30mm RSAT fisheye lens. All of these lenses for less than the price of a single additional Hasselblad lens. So this was really the deciding factor for me. And then on top of that, I was also able to buy a Hartblei 45mm tilt shift lens, which there is no equivalent Hasselblad tilt shift lens to the best of my knowledge. So we're going to load film in the camera, and the first thing to know is of the 2 switches on top of the camera, the one on the right is the switch that opens the film chamber. Once the film chamber is open, the entire insert comes out, and from there it is actually quite easy. Here I've already moved the empty spool to the take-up side. So I'll take out my new film and of course load it into the supply side. Now what we want to make sure is that the film is facing out, so that's going to help us orient how I put in the spool. There's a little tab here on one end that holds the spool, and that just folds out of the way, making loading the new spool very easy. Then once that's clipped back into place, I will start feeding the paper leader over the two rollers and feed it into the take-up spool. Now when I feed the leader into the take-up spool, I like to make sure that it is centered on the spool, and once you start winding it onto the spool, you want to make sure that it's also not binding, and also that the tab is folding back in on itself so that it won't slip off as film is advanced. Once the film is in the camera, of course, there's no way to open it back up and fix any problems. So once the spool is in place, you simply wind forward until the loading arrow is opposite the little red mark. Again, giving it one last check that everything is nice and tight, and then the cartridge goes back into the back. And then you simply close it. Now, I like to make sure that I'm holding the button open as I press the two shells together rather than clicking it into place. This ensures that everything is sealed up. And then, of course, make sure that the dark slide is in place. Now, when you first load the film, you're going to see an H in the little film counter window, and also the film exposure indicator is going to be red. Now, I don't know what that H stands for. I believe it's Cyrillic, but basically it means you're in the load position. So you simply wind forward on the winder until you reach a stop. And then at that point, you'll see a number 1 indicating in the film counter window, and the film exposure indicator is going to be white. And that means that the back is ready to expose the frame that is facing the camera at this point. Now, if I'm not going to be using the camera at this point, which I'm not going to be, this indicator here will just be a reminder to me later that the film is ready to be exposed. There is a matching indicator on the camera body that will be red, and what I'll need to do is actually wind the camera so that its indicator is also white, and at that point I can marry the two together and they are ready to shoot. So that's it. This back is ready to go. Now, the history of Hartblei is a little bit hard to track down. There was a lot going on in the mid-1990s in states of the former Soviet Union, and former state-owned facilities were soon being turned over into private enterprises. One of those enterprises was the optics and camera manufacturer Arsenal, located in Kiev. The Arsenal factory started producing cameras shortly after World War II ended and continued to produce cameras and other optics up until around 2009-2010. It's not exactly clear exactly when they stopped. They produced cameras of all types, from 35mm rangefinder cameras up through medium format cameras such as the Kiev 60 and the Kiev 88, on which the Hartblei 1006 is based. And this is where things start getting a little complicated. So from what I've been able to glean from a variety of different reputable sources, what we know is that Hartblei started working with a firm in Germany called Visa Phototechnik. And these two firms started their collaboration sometime around 1997. Now, a few years before that, in 1994, Visa had already started producing Kiev 88 cameras with the Pentacon 6 mount. So with that collaboration, Hartblei began producing highly modified Kiev 88 cameras and selling them under the Hartblei brand. Now, Hartblei, being based out of Kiev, decided to collaborate with a distributor based in Prague, Czech Republic, called Calimex, to distribute the Hartblei cameras. And this collaboration would last for the next 6 or 7 years. Now, sometime between the years of 2006 and 2008, a few things happened around the Hartblei concern that are frankly a little bit hard to figure out. I'm not even going to pretend to know exactly what happened, but what I can say for sure is sometime around 2006, a gentleman by the name of Stefan Steib in Germany approached Hartblei about entering into a partnership to focus the brand more on high-end lens manufacture, and he successfully started transitioning Hartblei in that direction, even going so far as to start building lenses with the West German Zeiss. But around that same time, the partners in Kiev had some kind of falling out with the partners in the Czech Republic at Calimex. So there were a few years there where there was a debate about who was the true Hartblei and who was producing the cameras for sale. But it all became somewhat moot a few years later. As I mentioned, Arsenal themselves stopped producing cameras around 2009, and that essentially finished the Hartblei association with film camera production. Now, Hartblei appears to still be in business. The hartblei.de website appears to be active, although it also appears that it hasn't been updated for 3 or 4 years. They do manufacture high-end lenses and lens adapters. I believe they still offer their HCam digital camera as well. There's also another website, hartblei.com, that is still up, although that is the old website from the old company. And although it shows a few of the old Kiev-based cameras listed on the website, I believe none of these are actually available or for sale. Let's take a look at a few more photos that I took with the camera. These first 3 here are additional photos shot on Film Photography Project's X-ray film. This is a film I really enjoy. If you haven't tried it before, it has some very unique characteristics that might suit your photography style, as I feel like it suits mine at times. Now let's take a look at a couple more photos that I shot at the Georgetown steam plant. These were shot on Lomography's Potsdam emulsion, which I think is Orwo 54 packaged as 120 film. So this shot was taken with the Zeiss Flectagon 50mm wide-angle lens, and I think this really starts to show off what the Zeiss Jena lenses can do. They are not totally on par with West German Zeiss lenses, but they are still fantastic lenses that can make some really great images. Now I've got a couple more photos to show. These are thrown in here just for fun. These were the photos that were taken on that mystery old expired film. Not sure exactly what film it was, but I think it was made by Agfa Geweert and probably from the 1960s. So obviously there's a lot of deterioration of the emulsion, but even when you start blasting through that deterioration, you still can see the sharpness that these Zeiss Jena lenses can produce. I think this one was shot with my 120mm lens. So that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed my overview of the Hartblei camera based on a Kiev 88 6x6, and apologies to anyone who was hoping to see me shoot with a Hasselblad. Hopefully this was at least entertaining in the meantime. And with that, I will say goodbye and talk to you next time.